Thanks for listening to The Innovation Experts, a new global podcast brought to you by Farnell, Newark, and Element 14, where you can find out about the latest innovations in the world of electronics. Hello and welcome to the next interview from The Innovation Experts, a global podcast by Farnell, Newark, and Element 14. My name is Cliff Ortmeyer, and I'm the Global Head of Technical Marketing, joining you from Chicago. Today we have Mike Purday, who is the Regional Manager of EMEA for Test and Measurement at Pico Technology, based in Cambridge, England. We'll be talking about how Pico's broad range of products, including their PC-based scopes, have enabled innovation from hybrid working through education. Welcome to the podcast, Mike.
Good afternoon from me here in the UK, and obviously good morning to you in Chicago. It's great to have been asked to join you on this podcast.
Yeah, I hear you're finally getting some sun over there too, which is nice, huh?
Yeah, it's improved. We had a thoroughly cold and miserable April and a very wet May, but actually we're experiencing some sun, some warmth, and it's a very welcome change, I have to be honest.
Nice. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you to join Pico?
Yes, of course. So I joined Pico in 2018, so nearly 3 years ago, as a distribution sales manager looking after specific geographical territories. Before that, I ran the sales and marketing department for a test and measurement consultancy for 5 years, doing bespoke test fixturing. And then more recently, earlier in 2021, I was asked to take a step up and run the EMEA, Europe, Middle East and Africa region for Pico Technology. So I look after the sales and the application engineering staff in EMEA and all of the accounts and all of the distributors, which obviously includes Farnell.
Well, how has business been during the pandemic for you guys?
Business has been fantastic, actually. So we've been incredibly fortunate in that we have, as a company, grown every year for the past 29 years since we were founded, and we've still managed to continue that growth through the pandemic. So I think we've been extremely fortunate, and we're extremely grateful for the growth and the performance that we've seen.
That's amazing. That's pretty stellar results. I gotta ask, because they've always intrigued me, and obviously we'll get into this into the podcast, but how did the PC-based scope start for you guys?
No, certainly interesting question. So Pico started 30 years ago, almost exactly 30 years ago, and our chief executive and the company's owner joined what at the time was a software consultancy business. And he invented a device that used parallel port technology, as it was then, to get data on and off from computers. And he realized that was the basis of a saleable product. That was actually where the first products that Pico manufactured or built came from. So we moved, and actually the software consultancy was subsequently closed down, and we moved into the PC connected test industry, and we were the first people to do it, and we still are the market leaders in that field.
Yeah, it seems like you've had a pretty amazing run. What do you think the secret sauce is to your success?
I think that one of the main things is the company's ethos. So we have a motto, and the motto is that we treat our customers like friends and our staff like family. So we really try and go the extra mile for all of our customers, and obviously for all of our distributors. And I think that culture, which comes from the very top of the company, is something that's actually really helped drive the growth. It keeps people very loyal to the business.
Yeah, I'd agree with that one. I gotta ask, when I think about a PC-based scope, I'm guessing there's a lot of advantages other than just size that I'm not even aware of, because, like I said, I've never used one before. What are the benefits of using a PC-based scope?
It's a very good question. Of course, it's a question we get asked a lot. So I think the three main underlying reasons are size, portability, and cost at a given price point. But from those, that spins off a lot of advantages for our PC-based technology. So we can pick those up in order, if you like, but if we think about size, then obviously size is key in the current environment where we've got people working from home potentially, or partly from home and partly from the office. So that's one thing. And the size leads to portability. So when people want to do work in the field, they need to have equipment that's small enough and portable enough and light enough to be taken out and used remotely. So from my own perspective, in more normal times, I do an awful lot of travelling, international travelling with my job, and I would simply pack my Picoscope together with my laptop into my laptop bag, and I'd take that onto an aeroplane in the cabin. But of course, one can't do that with a traditional benchtop oscilloscope. So those are some of the base reasons why the Picoscope range is so popular, and there are other benefits obviously that spin out from that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that kind of got brought to my attention, obviously being around for a number of years and forgetting what it's like to be in a college dorm room, but if you think about the size, you've got a computer that's on your desk, and when I'm looking in my office over here, I've got a scope on my desk that's a regular size scope, and I think, wait a minute, you couldn't actually physically fit that in a dorm room or an apartment. I mean, it literally takes up a lot of space. So space really can really play, I guess, an important factor.
I think it does. I think your point about the computer is a very good and very interesting one, because, of course, pretty much everybody that we're working with already has the computer. So when you look at a traditional benchtop oscilloscope, somewhere in the region of 70% of the functionality in that unit is also contained within a computer. So by stripping that out and by actually using the computer that you've already got on the desk, we reduce the size of the box that the scope actually is in. So obviously you're using a lot less bench space, and your point about the dorms is a good one for students. But the other thing you're doing, of course, is removing a lot of the cost, because if you're actually utilizing the computer, then you're not needing the cost of replicating that functionality within the scope. So there's a significant cost implication there, and Pico products are all exceptionally keenly priced for their functionality.
Yeah, I'm assuming that most of the main processing functionality it's obviously included in the scope itself. So therefore, the computer's really just acting as an interface, a display interface, to do some, just display processing or capturing of data, things like that.
There's technology on board the scope, but it is using the processing power in the computer. So the Pico software package is obviously doing a lot of the work. So there's FPGA technology going on in the scope itself, but there's a lot of processing that's done actually on the PC. So we're using that processing power in the computer to harness the power that you've already got within your laptop or within your desktop. Also worth saying that with the PC connected equipment, a lot of our units can also take their power from the PC as well, so they can be standalone. Some of the higher performance models need to be plugged in, they need power supplies to go with them, but with the lower end units, they can take their power from the PC, so it doubles up as a power supply as well.
That's convenient. What benefits does the PC actually bring versus, say, like an oscilloscope in terms of being able to do screen captures and be able to print? I'm guessing, just trying to think of some things that, would be easier and more beneficial from using an external PC.
Of course, no, it's a good question. So I think you've got clearly a choice of the type of computer that you use. So you can use a laptop with a small display if you want something that's portable and integrated. So I'm running here with a Dell laptop with a 13-inch screen. But you could, if you wished, use a very high performance desktop type PC if you preferred. And of course, the thing that you have the most choice about, that you really wouldn't have any choice about with a benchtop oscilloscope, is you have a choice of display. So if you, going back to my example of using a laptop for a small integrated package, you can keep that compact. But the beauty of using a PC connected scope is that you can have your display as large as you wish. So if you want to run a 65-inch ultra high definition display and you need to drill into your signals in great detail, then you can do that with PC connected test equipment.
Yeah, that's true. I, was just thinking back because I used to be, pretty heavy into analog, and obviously I was looking for a lot of noise and spikes and things like that, and it would have been nice back then to have a much larger display to be able to pick those things out. And obviously we do see the displays rising in size these days, probably to help take that into account, and plus, all the other features that are basically getting incorporated into scopes. What about in terms of sharing data?
I think undoubtedly it does, because if you're using a benchtop oscilloscope or a benchtop piece of equipment, then that piece of equipment usually stands alone. Whereas with Pico, obviously being PC connected, you're already onto a network, potentially onto the internet, or the ability to share files becomes much easier. So the Pico software can be installed, and it's free of charge, can be installed on computers anywhere in the world. And if you in Chicago had a file that you wanted me here in Cambridge to look at, that you made using a Picoscope, then you could very easily send it to me, and I could simply load it onto the software and view it here. So it makes sharing and transferring data very much easier. Yes, that's absolutely right.
What about, I know that I've read some information about a simulation mode as well.
Yeah, we offer the ability to simulate hardware and software, so it's particularly aimed at people that want to try Pico's software before they actually buy a Picoscope or a data logger. And you can download, as I said, the software's free of charge. Anybody can go to picotech.com and download the software, and they can download it and they can try it free of charge, and you can choose to simulate a piece of hardware and actually you get to grips with the software before you choose to invest in a Pico product. So we use that as a demonstration tool, really, effectively. Are very useful, particularly in academia, where, for example, you might have students that want to buy Picoscopes, but they want to try the software, or their university or their college wants them to try the software before they get started.
Yeah. Although I gotta be honest with the price of some of the entry-level models, you're almost getting to the point where it's not that much of a financial investment compared to traditional or higher end scopes. So I think you guys have made it really quite affordable.
Thank you. Yes, that's always been the intention. So our entry level oscilloscopes start from just over $100 for a 10 megahertz fully featured scope. But it's worth pointing out that those scopes use the same software as our high-end real-time scopes. So we sell oscilloscopes that go up to with a real-time bandwidth of up to 1 gigahertz, and they all use the same software package. So actually, if you get students who they or their university wants to invest in the entry-level scopes, it's giving them experience with a software platform that they can then take on to use in industry moving forward. So yes, it is very cost effective to be able to do that. We've actually got universities that are saying now, well, with students, it's a bit like having your own textbooks, isn't it? You can have your own oscilloscope that you keep through the 3 years or the 4 years of the course, and it's yours. So we very much want to be able to maintain that moving forward.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something to get into there. I could see it being a tremendous advantage. I remember way back in the day, we used to have our little fishing tackle boxes with our 555 timers and our wire kit and breadboard and stuff like that, and never dreamt of having any kind of equipment in the dorm room. And I mean, fast forward to today, where you can actually have a scope, sitting on your desk that takes up hardly any room. It's pretty amazing.
I think that's right, and I think that your point about kits are practical sessions is a really good one. So throughout the pandemic, over the last 14 months, we've seen a very large lift in demand for the entry-level scopes for remote teaching and for distance learning. So universities equipping their students, obviously the students are not able to come onto campus, but they've been able to equip them with scopes, sometimes as part of kits, that students have been able to carry on doing their lab work and their coursework remotely. So I think it's been a huge bonus for those students that otherwise wouldn't have been able to do the practical element of their courses without the equipment that we, through yourselves, we've supplied to a number of universities and colleges globally.
Do you see that trend continuing?
Yes, I think it is something that's probably going to stay. So we will, hopefully, and fortunately for the next cohort of students coming through, we will be going back to in-person teaching in the fall semester, I hope. But talking to a number of the universities that invested in Picoscopes this time last year, they're saying exactly that. If for $120, $130, we can buy each student their own scope, why wouldn't you? Because ultimately it is a bit like the textbook. Everybody buys the textbooks, they keep them, they get to use them, and there's nothing stopping people doing that with Picoscopes. So I think there's something to take away from the pandemic, is that do we actually have to come into a laboratory to do coursework? And the answer is no. Actually, we can be more flexible than that. We can do coursework remotely, and that means that students can work on practical projects at the weekends or in the evenings or at a time to suit themselves, really.
If we move away from like the education piece, I guess in my mind, and I have no idea why, I'd always assumed that these would be used in like production areas or production lines, things like that, because of need for space and being able to integrate into other systems. Where do you see the usages outside of the let's call it the university or the regular bench settings?
Okay, so you picked up on a couple of quite interesting points there. I think the point about production lines is interesting, and I think also the point about incorporating to other things is interesting. So taking those in turn, our production environments, obviously space is an absolute premium. So the ability to put a small unit onto a benchtop linked to a PC or a laptop is very valuable. And I think the other thing to pick up there is that production often faces very significant cost constraints. So when you're looking at product design, which is our core market, product design, embedded design and debug, there's often more money than there is in product testing, end-of-line testing. So the competitive sort of nature of the cost of some of our products really gives them an edge in those cost competitive environments. So picking up on one thing that we found, so as well as real-time oscilloscopes and data loggers, we also have an RF product range, and in that RF product range we have 2 vector network analyzers, VNAs, and those are things which have historically been cost prohibitive for incorporating into production environments. But with the advent of PC connected VNAs, we've been able to bring those down to a price point where they are actually a viable option for people doing product test, end-of-line test, so and also in a production environment. So I think there's a cost and form factor implication there when it comes to those environments.
Yeah, I started out my career working on a VNA, and I remember that was a pretty heavy-duty investment, and I would think especially with all the RF stuff, I mean, everything's obviously moving battery-powered and RF connectivity and everything. I would see that being a much more viable option now from the production line, from the QA and just the general production testing aspect. I could see that being a real hit.
It is, yes, because if you used VNAs in the past, you'll remember them being expensive things that were in great demand. So a company might have had one VNA, but it was very much a test or an R&D style resource, and it wasn't something that would have been allowed out onto a production shop floor because it would have been too valuable a resource and too expensive a thing to let out. Whereas now we have 6 and 8.5 gigahertz VNAs with entry level pricing well below $10,000. So we've enabled VNA applications to come in at price points that they wouldn't historically have managed to achieve. So I think that's a real benefit there.
Yeah, I do remember actually there being quite a few people wanting to use it, and luckily I've always been a little bit bigger of a guy, so I got my time in whenever I needed it. So I guess I don't have to be the muscle anymore. You're taking my privy away from me, but that's okay. I understand.
Yeah, VNAs for the masses, so it's all good.
Yeah. There's a T-shirt there. I think at least 10 people will buy it. I'll be one of them. I like that one. I really want the T-shirt now. Obviously there's the bench and the production side of things, but are there any other uses from a PC-based standpoint or any other types of applications where people have either used it in systems or actually as part of a product?
That's another good question. So yes, we have, and we sell a significant number of Picoscopes, particularly for our integration into our OEM style applications. So again, when you go back to thinking about the form factor of an oscilloscope, a traditional benchtop oscilloscope does not lend itself well to incorporating into another system because it's large, it's got a built-in screen that you wouldn't want to actually see, and usually speaking, they're closed box, black box type applications, so you wouldn't be able to necessarily easily control that piece of equipment other than using it in the sort of traditional way it was set up. So what we do, obviously, we've got the form factor that allows incorporation into OEM systems. We've got the lack of screen means that obviously you're not having screen architecture that you're not going to use, but also we allow people to control Pico products using what we call a software development kit, an SDK interface. So it's possible to control the Picoscope or the data logger using a software package of your choice. So if you've got an OEM system that's running on, for example, NI's LabVIEW platform, we have the easy ability to control the scope using LabVIEW. Likewise for some of the C languages, for Python, for MATLAB. So we have software examples, code examples for all of those things. So we, as a consequence, have a number of OEM customers that are buying our scopes not to use on the bench, but they're buying them to use them within other things. To give you some examples, we've got them used as the control systems or part of the control systems for a laser-based system that's actually used to, believe it or not, to remove tattoos. It's a tattoo removal system. So slightly novel application, but we've also got quite a lot of OEM customers in high-end particle physics. So particle acceleration rings in Germany, for example, are using hundreds of picoscopes within rack mounts for OEM-style applications. So again, as I said, the form factor and the price, obviously, but the other thing is this ability to control the Pico product using a software package of your choice. It makes a compelling and attractive proposition for OEM applications.
Yeah, I gotta call you out on this one though. Two things. Number one, you stole one of my questions at the end because I always like to ask people, what's the craziest application? And you just threw out tattoo removal system. I've never heard that, and I'm pretty sure I'll never hear that again in any other kind of application. So I think right now you win the gold cup for craziest application. I never would have seen that one coming. The particle physics one, I guess I could see where that would be, where it would obviously be quite useful, but I think I can count those number of customers on both of my hands. So you pretty much probably have that market wrapped up. What other products do you guys, obviously we've been talking a lot about the scopes and the VNAs. What other applications do you guys have seen a good fit for a PC-based type piece of test equipment?
Of course, good question. So, as you say, the Picoscopes, we have oscilloscopes from 10 megahertz through to a gigahertz in bandwidth. We have data loggers, which can log physiological parameters, whether that be temperature or current or voltage or electrical signals of one form or another. And then we have our RF product division, which is, as we talked about a little bit, the VNAs, but we also have a range of sampling oscilloscopes. So sampling scopes offer a lower cost alternative to high bandwidth real-time scopes when you have a repetitive signal. So assuming you have a repetitive signal, we have the ability to measure bandwidths of up to 25 gigahertz at a price point that would be much more palatable than a 25 gigahertz real-time scope.
Is there anything else from a inclusion standpoint that you guys offer that maybe might be a competitive advantage versus, say, your competition?
So in terms of inclusion, being software-based, obviously with a traditional benchtop piece of test equipment, you would need to update that using firmware updates that would have to be uploaded to the instrument. Whereas being software-based, then all of our customers can simply download the latest version of software and they retrospectively get all of the features that have been added to the latest version of the software. So we're at the moment working on a very large major release that's going to come next year, an update to the Picoscope software, and everybody that's got a Picoscope is going to benefit from that update free of charge. So that's one I think major point. So software updates for the life of the product go along with 5-year warranties as standard on all of the real-time scopes. The other thing that we include that perhaps our competitors would charge for is that when we look at our serial protocol decoders, all of those are included free of charge. So depending on the scope that you pick, we have up to 21 serial protocol standards available. And those are all included free of charge, assuming that the scope that you pick has the bandwidth and the sampling rate and the memory depth to be able to deal with the standard. So that differentiates us from our competitors, a lot of whom charge a lot of money for certain serial protocol decoders.
Speaking of competition, I'm guessing that you're seeing more and more people coming out with USB-based or just more PCB-based type, say, test equipment in general. Do you see that trend continuing, or how do you feel about it going forward?
It's a very interesting question. We're in a fortunate position in that we're the market leader in PC connected test equipment. It's fair to say that whilst we're not a small player in terms of the scale of the global T&M market, we are a small but fast-growing percentage of it. When we look at our competitors, some of them have launched PC connected equipment, but the risk if you're making benchtop equipment at a significantly higher price point, the risk you as a benchtop manufacturer run is effectively eroding your own market. So I think by being a dedicated PC connected company, we don't have that risk. We don't run that risk. So we've seen, I think, a slight reluctance from some of the larger benchtop T&M equipment manufacturers to go down that route for that reason. Of course, we have competition. All companies have competition, but we've got a dominant position in the market, backed by a 30-year history of doing this. We're also known for customer service and for quality and for warranties, etc., support. So I think we're in quite a strong, dominant position within that PC connected market.
Yeah, well, I think that your numbers speak for themselves with the growth rates that you've had. So I think you guys obviously have found a great market niche, and I think right now is probably probably looking to be one of the best times in history for you with all the remoteness, the price points. It's almost like the perfect good storm for you guys.
It really has been. I think it's reasonable to say that actually the pandemic and the consequences of the pandemic have actually given us a boost, because people have wanted to be able to work flexibly and remotely. So for example, I'm in the office this afternoon, but I spend a lot of my time working at home, and I need to be able to move my equipment from one place to another simply and easily. And with the Pico products, I can just pop them into my laptop bag and off I go. So we've benefited, I think, from a lot of people needing to work from home, but also needing to have this sort of hybrid style of working where they can move their equipment around. And I think that's been a really big plus for us. And when you couple that with the academic demand that we discussed earlier, I think that the two things, as you say, have come together to make it a perfect storm for us. So whilst obviously the pandemic's been horrendous, it's been an awful thing for a lot of us to have lived through, I think it has, from a commercial perspective, driven demand for Pico's products, for which we're clearly very grateful.
I got to say, I've learned more about PC-based scopes and equipment than I knew before, and now I'm actually kind of want one, so I might have to work one in here somehow just to play with it, just so I can have a really large screen. But I want to thank you for your time today. But before you go, at the end of every podcast, I like to do a little quick fire round just to know a little bit more about you, because obviously you're the personality behind this. So, like I said, usually I ask what's the craziest application your devices have ever been seen in or been used with. I'm guessing we're going to stick with tattoo removal, right?
Well, that's one, but we can pick up on some other slightly odd applications. So one of our data loggers, and in fact, our biggest selling ever product, our TC08 data logger, has been used in a huge number of temperature monitoring applications. But I think one of the strangest one was monitoring the temperature of penguins' eggs to make sure that they're being kept at the correct temperature for the baby penguins to hatch. So I think that one is up there with the tattoo removal.
Dude, you don't cease to amaze me on this discussion. That's You pretty. Yeah, you got me. I'm speechless on that one. That's yeah, okay. All right. Well, you won there. I know when we talked previously, you'd mentioned something about you're kind of a big fan of music. What are you listening to now? Because I'm a bit of a wannabe audiophile myself. What are you into, and what are you listening to right now?
I listen to a lot of music. A lot of it is classical and or jazz and blues. So last night I was listening to an old album, actually an album from 1961, so 60 years ago. Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington, The Great Summit, and it's two fantastic musicians coming together, and it was a live session, and it's just hard to believe that is 60 years ago, because it's just aged so well, and it still works in 2021 as well as it did in 1961. So astonishing piece of music, and two fantastic musicians that hadn't to that point done very much together. So great album.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. Well, maybe when I get back over to Leeds, and maybe I'll take a stop by Cambridge, and I'll check out your system. So I'll just invite myself if you don't mind.
You'd be extremely welcome, and we could go for the all-you-could-eat sushi at the same time.
That's what I'm talking about. Duke Ellington and all-you-can-eat sushi. What more is there to life?
What's not to like?
Exactly. Well, hey, I want to thank you for today. It's been a great discussion, and, I'm just wondering if people want to get in touch with you or learn more about Pico, how would they go about doing that?
The best place to start is to go to our website. So www.picotech.com. That's picotech.com. We've got full details of all our products. Everything includes pricing, and there's also a complete list of sort of country contacts. So go there, find out about the products, and then if you want to get in touch, obviously, please feel free to reach out. That's the best way to go and find out more about our products and the applications that they're used in.
Right. And when you're ready to purchase, Newark, Farnell, or Element 14, right?
Absolutely, yes. So you're our biggest global distribution account. We're extremely grateful for all of the help and the support that we get from the three respective organisations. We're enjoying fantastic growth with Newark, Element 14, and Farnell, and long may it continue. So, yes, absolutely.
Completely agree. So, Mike, I want to thank you so much for joining us today on the Innovation Experts podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I'd very much like to encourage all of our listeners to check out Mike Purday and Pico Technology to find out more about their specialist products and services. And with that, we'll see you next time. Take care, Mike.
Thank you very much indeed, Cliff. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
We'd like to hear what you have to say about how test and measurement equipment supports innovation in your industry. So please get in touch with us at technology@farnell.com. If you enjoyed the podcast, don't forget to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, I'll see you all for another interview on the Innovation Experts very soon. Until then, thanks for listening.